We are going to the part on technological innovation. And I am very happy to introduce David Dubois, the Associate Professor of Marketing of Insead, who is also a supporter of the Insead Global Luxury Forum. So David, please, the floor is yours. The clicker, yes.
All right. So thank you very much, Katia, for this kind of introduction, and good morning, everyone. So my name is David, and I'm an associate professor at Insead. My research interest really is at the intersection of two fundamental types of human behavior. On the one hand, digital consumer behavior, so how people share information, how people search online, etc. And on the other hand, how consumers' goal, power and status goals kind of inform us about the kind of products and services they want, and particularly when it comes to luxury consumption. So digital consumer behavior and psychology of status and power on the other hand. Now, what I'd like to share with you, and I'll try to really be short on time, is share with you some of the recent project that, ambitious research project that Insead has started to work with some of you, some data partners are in the room, and try to, try to engage you on what we could go further, and of course we'd like to continue this discussion. So those of you who want to join this task force around big data and luxury consumption, will be available over lunch. So when you think about digital data, everyone from high ultra net worth individuals to affluent customers leave countless number of digital footprints behind them, as you would leave your steps on a sandy beach. Right? Now, what we've been doing at Insead is first, trying to make sense of that big data and understanding when can we map out these different footprints and how do they reflect different types of customer behavior. And so we started thinking about what we call the 4S of big data. In this big ocean of data, we focus on 4 dimensions, 4 types of data that differently reflect our customer behavior. So if you think about the customer journey and this big data ocean, obviously the first one is search. Everyone searches, okay? Coming from obviously Google, but also Yandex and some of these other search queries. Search is important first because everyone is on search, okay? And also it's a measure of interest, right? So it can give you a lot of information about consideration set. When consumers, clients search your brand, what kind of brands are they looking for? Second one is obviously social media that we already talked about this morning. And these social footprints obviously give you a lot of information about what customers want, what your clients want, the brand aficionados, but also your brand detractors, right? And I would say, in terms of insights, can give you lots of emotional brand image, conversation type of insights. Now, the last two, which forms this 4S framework, are really the site and shop footprints. So site refers to any website analytics data. So when people go on your website, what do they do, how long do they stay, etc. And shop refers to e-commerce websites. So actually, how are you able to transfer this desire into a final purchase, right? And so when you think about this type of data, it's very important to think about the type of insights that they can generate, but also the type of biases. So for instance, one distinction that we are making is part of the visible part of the iceberg is public behavior. That's important to keep in mind when you analyze that data, because you don't do the same thing in a private setting, in a public setting, than what you would do in a private setting. There are also some biases, about the search and shop and site, but these would be more related to do you have complete information about whether search or customers search on mobile versus desktop, for instance. And then the goal really is to how can we leverage all these footprints along the customer journey, right? So in a typical customer journey, this is how I would argue it would look like. You start with search, then you try to do some social media, share it with friends, you go back to visit the website, you really like this product, now you click and you've purchased, okay? And so what I'd like to do now is really quickly share with you 3 projects that we've been starting to work on at Insead to show you how we can leverage this data for better either descriptive or predictive power. So I'm going to skip this because this is just to give you the power of data. Some of you might be already familiar with this. So this is an example of how usage, in particular, this is usage of, iPhone versus Android, so iOS versus Android. iOS are in red, Android are in green. And what's really amazing about this type of map, so this was actually New York, this is Chicago, where I've been living, with the northern area being much richer than the southern area. And so what you see is really this different types of consumption reflects actual preference for luxury, in this case, for Apple brands, right? Wealthier areas, wealthier type of products consumption. Now, first project I want to talk about really leverages search data and kind of aims at trying to make a methodological contribution. Right? So we often hear that luxury brands are non-comparable, but at the same time, when clients are online, they start comparing you, right? And so what we've been doing here, particularly focusing on the luxury watchmaking market, but we're expanding to other markets, is how can we leverage search data to try to recreate consideration set, maps of consideration set, which were very time-consuming to do. So let's imagine that what we do is we actually look at the search proximity between searches. So to what extent a customer X is likely, if he has searched for a certain brand, he's also going to search later for another brand. And basically, by computing the search proximity measures, we're able to recreate, using millions of search data, these perceptual maps with 2 benefits for brands. One is indeed that we leverage behavioral data, so actual search. The other one is that because you're looking at search data, obviously you can look at maps of how brands are related to one another, but you can also relate it to any other keywords indicative of lifestyle. Let me show you an example with the luxury watchmaking. So this is a map that we would get out of millions of search historical data. And you see some relationship between brands that you can make sense of very easily. So for instance, here we put 2 axes. So those brands that are more pricey on the one hand, less pricey, those that have a positioning that is more tech versus aesthetic. But what we can do also is we can correlate this data with any other keywords. For instance, and we'll hear about it more with Jean-Claude Viver later, to what extent these brands are actually associated with smartwatch. Right? So what do? Well, we actually just integrate another keyword here, and that gives us a 3-dimensional data on, in this map, well, who are the brands? What are the brands that then are also most associated with a smartwatch, the percentage of people who search smartwatch, right? And here the winner, which we're going to hear more about, is Tag Heuer, okay? Second project that looks at social over search. So we look at two data sources here. And the idea of this project really is to look into the relationship between the brand luxuriousness and the social value. So we often hear luxury brands, they create some dream. There's a dream value. And this dream value mostly is reflected in what people do with their friends, and how these brands help them to be with others, to self-enhance with others, etc. And this is an idea that was once formulated by Thorsten Veblen, who coined the word conspicuous consumption. Right? So what we did was very simply trying to see whether we could test this hypothesis. Right? So is a brand luxuriousness related to the amount of public behavior controlling for private behavior, okay? So now if we look at the 4S framework, what we did is for 300 brands, we looked at 3 variables. Level of luxuriousness, which was assessed by price. So for every brand, every product, what's the price online? Price as a proxy for luxuriousness. For public interest, we look at, for each brand, the amount of social media mentions, likes, etc., on social media for that brand. For private interest, we look at the amount of search data for that particular brand. Okay, so 3 variables: luxuriousness, price, social media, and search. And basically what we find over many markets is this amazing relationship between the level of luxuriousness here on the x-axis and the social media over search ratio. So essentially, the more luxurious you are, the more your ability to generate social media public interest for a brand controlling for private interest. Okay? Now, one last example in 2 seconds, where we actually look at all 4 of these S framework. Now, if social values are very important, very interrelated with a brand value, a luxury brand value, it means that if we're able to track the changes in consumers' social values, it should give us a prediction about when and why people might want more or want less products that are luxury or associated with status. And so one of the product that this is the part of at the core of my research is heels. Heels are very interesting because they've been associated with women since the end of the Industrial Revolution, and it's very easy to track them online, right? And so what we do is, the idea is very simple. Thinking about the social values that we have between men and women, we should see that if heels are a status symbol, and if the status between men and female is very important in triggering the desire for heels, then we should find that the more you're in a society or a time where men and female are equal, the less the needs for heels, okay? And that's exactly what we find. So let me show you, 2 pieces of evidence. On the consumption side, we find that shocks such as Me Too were really instrumental, provoked a massive drop of the actual demand for heels online, and this was particularly more pronounced for red heels, okay? As you can see here. Now, what about on the production side? Then we looked at S framework, so site data, to what extent, so exhaustive collection data about shoes collection across the world. And what we looked at is the proportion of shoes within the assortment that are heels, right? So you have a distribution like this with brands like Amy Smilovic, who have about 40% of shoes that are heels, and Christian Louboutin, who is here, obviously has a much larger share of heels. And then we look at the designer characteristics, and what we find is that designers who are male, who come from high gender inequality countries, who tend to be older, so for whom these values of male-female are more ingrained, tend to produce a massive, much greater proportion of heels in their assortment. And again, we find the same thing for red heels. Right? So my takeaway is not so much that this is interesting for heels in the heels market, but really to show you the power of big data in trying to getting a predictive and descriptive power to understand luxury consumption. So if you want to engage more on this topic, feel free to do so over lunch or later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Thank you.